This is what Clair Obscur looked like back in 2020 at the start of COVID. And of course, this is what it looks like now. The thing is, now that they've successfully innovated, it's open season, that's how the industry works, we'll see a spike in turn-based combat games, and Unreal asset libraries are already taking a pounding, and that's just the obvious effects on the industry. One factor that can't be replicated is the COVID lockdowns, whose timing proved pivotal to the game's early success. Back when it all began, creative director Guillaume Broch spent 4 years at Ubisoft on big-budget games, before being moved onto the Might and Magic franchise that was propped up by mobile entries from the studio's Shanghai branch. With his creativity stumped and a simmering passion project that he knew would never really get greenlit due to all the red tape that's necessary when handling big budgets, he struck out on his own. What started as a concept inspired by the prized sci-fi novel La Horde de Contrevent about a band of expeditioners pushing into the unknown, evolved into a concept that relied more on the theme of time. And so in 2019, when he was experimenting with Unreal Engine 4, he titled his very first personal project Sandfall, with time and an hourglass in mind, and the name stuck, inspiring the name of the studio he founded the following year, along with friends Tom Guillemin, who's a programmer, and producer Francois Maurice. To date, this trio are the only 3 industry veterans to work at Sandfall, between them going on to develop the concept into a steampunk adventure set in Victorian London, tentatively titled We Lost.
And the story of how we lost.
This teaser accompanied a Reddit post intended to draw in passionate creatives, voice actors especially, who could help breathe life into what was, at its heart, a passion project, at a time when much of the industry was struggling under the weight of COVID sanctions, something most of us probably remember, and despite their studio able to offer little incentive beyond a shared love of gaming, attracted the attention of amateurs and professionals alike who never would have had the time in their day otherwise. And I'm not kidding about it being a passion project. The subreddit in question is literally called r/record this for free. So there were no agencies fielding talent here, just a heartfelt post reaching out to not only out-of-work actors, but frankly anybody who wanted to have a go, explaining candidly that if they fit the role, they'd be asked to see the project through. And this might have explained why a common post resulted in the wealth of talent that would ultimately follow. And one of these actors who would land a role was an ex-private equity investor with some pretty kooky credentials that included things like taking part in NASA space simulations, and she was looking for something creative to fill her newfound spare time. After joining the team, however, Broch noted that what really set her apart was her creative streak, and in the hopes of cultivating that, he asked her to try writing for him, which quickly resulted in her organic transition to the lead writer position. Her name was Jennifer Svedberg-Yen, and the driving force behind the game's mind-bending narrative, and it's hard not to see her mix of intelligence and offbeat experiences infused through Clair Obscur's DNA.
And that started with the hook.
And at the same time, Broch was scouring forums for anyone willing to create music for the game. And having yet to secure a budget, he needed artists who were willing to invest their time for the sheer joy of the craft. And among them was a humble guitar teacher so enamored with gaming soundtracks that he would fall asleep listening to them on repeat, sharing his pieces online in the hopes that he might delight some of the handful of listeners who stumbled across his work. He posted one song on a random website he'd never used before.
C'était la première fois de ma vie que j'allais sur ce forum pour poster un truc. Et Guillaume, il est tombé sur cette musique, sur ce forum-là aussi, alors qu'il n'y va jamais non plus.
And having cast his net wide, Broch skimmed over the same forum that very night, a serendipitous crossing of paths that would change everything. His first conversation with Lorient Testard was the only one he needed, revealing not just a significant crossover in gaming passions, but a suppressed genius just waiting for the opportunity to cut loose. Over the following years, he would go on to write a whopping 154 tracks in his Paris flat alone, eventually bringing in vocalist Alice Duport-Percier to assist with the lyrics, and over an intensive 2-day session, a small ensemble choir to breathe life into the music right at the very end. And so the team had the words, and they had the music, but Unreal's stock assets still cried out for some kind of visual identity. We Lost steampunk roots found their natural partner in Nicolas Maxim Frankum, a Belgian artist who, only 2 years earlier, had been uploading onto ArtStation dazzling visions of mechanized toy soldiers marching across lush painted backdrops. His ethereal, puppeteer-like style of combatants would go on to become a visual signature of the game, and would both feed the narrative and the musical direction as much as it would draw from them for inspiration. And as composer Lorient Testard put it, "My inspirations came a lot from Nicolas's concept art. They're truly evocative and absolutely stunning. It really helps me to picture an entire sound universe. to imagine themes and melodies. The paintress kneeling with her arms crossed. The narrative themes stem from that one, so the main themes are really based on that idea. Nicholas might have seemed like the obvious fit were it not for the fact that he too had not worked in game development before. By the way, if you're enjoying this, then I would be so grateful for a like or even a subscribe. It honestly helps me out so much, so genuinely thank you so much if you can. Right, back to the video. Jennifer Svedberg-Yen, Lorien Testard, and Nicholas Maxon Frankum were the foundation of what would become one of the most acclaimed RPGs of its era. Guillaume achieving such success on the shoulders of three of them in tandem proves his skill as a producer, both in terms of sourcing and then fostering talent. These three amateurs, alongside three core veterans, then spent 2020 laying the foundations of the studio before the game itself would take root. By early 2021, the game had grown to 15, and the COVID restrictions in France being scaled down to just night curfew necessitated the move to a larger office, which then swelled with young developers that, despite being short on experience, were pumped up with passion and that post-lockdown energy. And in the months that followed, a demo began to take shape. While it was only a prototype, it was already impressive for less than a year's work. Roach's Victorian fantasy that had been stitched together from stock assets was now taking on a bold and original aesthetic as Nicholas's distinctive vision came into focus. Now enter Kepler Interactive, the publishing house born the same year with an unusual model. Co-owned by actual developers, it was built with the goal of providing talented new studios a workable budget without invasive oversight. Considering the power that engines like Unreal and their massive library of assets could offer creative indie developers, when leveraged with the care necessary, then Kepler's vision to put the player experience first is very exciting when you consider the intoxicating Pacific Drive and a deeply satisfying Sifu were both brought to life in Unreal thanks to Kepler's support as well. But before all this, back in 2021 when Kepler was founded, it was Sandfall that first came onto their radar, and from the opening conversation the fit was obvious. Guillaume's vision of making a game on his own terms aligned perfectly with their mission not to ebb the flow of creative freedom, and so a deal was struck quickly, and with it Expedition 33 gained the foundation it so desperately needed to thrive. The injection of financial backing was important because it was the key that unlocked the final door, behind which sat professional voice actors and an in-house motion capture studio that allowed Jennifer's expanding narrative to start seeing signs of life. And the timing couldn't have been better as it aligned with the project's shift to the powerful new Unreal 5 engine. As 2023 rolled in, the team had grown to 22, and in the following months Kepler made the partnership public, after which Microsoft committed to releasing the title on day one for the Xbox Game Pass. With investment and exposure secured, and Nicholas's evocative artwork establishing a visual identity, and Testard's music capturing the hearts and minds of those in and outside the company alike, there was no longer any doubt that the project had grown far beyond its humble beginnings. And yet, humble it remained, demonstrated here during a heartfelt performance by the musicians to their smitten teammates, echoing that morale-lifting magic that you only find in a close-knit team where the CEO knows every single person who works for them. Seeing him here, flute in hand, says everything. No ego, just pride as he mucks in, not simply to entertain his team, although that's obviously a part of it, but to kindle that collective fire that comes when you bring a team together. This sort of thing transforms the dreaded crunch, and it's a luxury often denied large teams who are spread across studios and time zones. This group knows they're onto something extraordinary, and you can honestly see it in their faces. Of the countless blind auditions, Ben Starr and Jennifer English shone through in particular.
Fighting.
Yes, fine. Look, Ben wins. What can I do?
And along with the remainder of the cast, secured their roles on the merit of their voice demos alone, with the exception of Andy Serkis and Charlie Cox, who might well have been approached for their star power, but delivered performances superb enough that both of them fully justify their castings. By the end of 2023, the small team had grown further still, and then there was a new trailer in the works, and production was reaching cinematic heights as the studio sunk in month after month of refinements. In June the following year, thanks to Microsoft's backing of a day one Game Pass launch, Sandful took the opportunity to unveil their passion project turned masterpiece at the 2024 Xbox Showcase.
Even if we fail, we lay the trail for those who will come after.
Suffice it to say, audiences were floored. Now, it's worth noting at this point that big studios routinely turn out larger projects in less time, but funding the huge teams needed to do this is a cost soaked up by the player. And sure, maybe games like GTA can justify its higher cost because Rockstar, along with companies like Naughty Dog and CD Projekt Red, will invest your money into a mind-bending level of fidelity and replayability. But those games aren't your average summer blockbusters, and most of the time we're paying over the odds for yet another generic sequel churned out while the franchise still holds relevance. And yet, even Clair Obscur's Super Deluxe Edition with cream and cherries on top undercut all of the above at just $60. And for those of us who just want to play the game, it's $50 standard. Well, $49.99 to be specific, but here's an interesting fact. Do you want to know some other games that retailed as exactly that cost in the past few years? Just, for comparison's sake. Legend of Zelda 1986 on the original NES. Same cost without being adjusted for inflation, although games were crazy expensive back then, so maybe that's not the best example. But 12 years after that, so in 1998, over 25 years ago, Half-Life on the PC was still $49.99.
Gordon! Man, am I glad to see you. What the hell are these things?
And that kind of pricing trend continued year on year until maybe 10 years ago. And just so we're clear, $49.99 in 1998 is about $100 in today's money, like almost exactly. So as painful as it might be to hear, $70 for a game these days is actually cheaper than games were in the past.
Bollocks.
Although from a player point of view, we've got console subscriptions, season passes, and microtransactions as well to suck you dry in other ways. But nevertheless, here we are with a visually stunning, audially stunning, narratively stunning cinematic gem with massive replay value to boot that's as cheap as, if not cheaper than any mainstream game that's been sold over the last 30 years. The point is, Clair Obscur is cheap, and its roughly 6-year development turnaround was relatively slow by AAA standards, but it set a massive precedent for what's possible moving forward. What allowed Sandful to achieve this, other than cutting out a layer of corporate greed, was the way that their small team allowed them to be dynamic. With everyone in close proximity, key people can put their heads together with relative ease, hash out ideas, and then walk back to their desk in the same amount of time it takes to have a smoke break or a café allonge on the balcony, one or both being an hourly necessity in France depending on your age, at least in my experience. And that level of reactivity cuts down on the enormous time losses that are pretty much inevitable in massive productions, from pointless meetings through to the domino-like knock-on effect across departments of deadlines being missed. Logistical constraint in big business is no joke, but with both Kepler and Sandful operating teams in double digits, even the CEOs were free to just pick up the phone and swap quick updates, removing yet another layer of middle management, with Broach himself saying that he spent at most 10% of his time on management and the remaining 90% in Unreal, working on modeling and textures, crunching out content just like everybody else. When describing the team divide, lead programmer Tom Guillermo was quoted as saying, "We're a core team of less than 30 people." And when asked to describe how many industry veterans were in the team, Broach said, 3 people out of 33, so exactly 10%. Broach has a good sense of humor, and of course employees come and go, but the Easter egg painting found in the game does indeed show 32 people and a dog called Monoko, and so the final team size of 33 is seemingly accurate. However, Sandful's 33 odd employees aren't capable of wearing every hat necessary to pull off a global platform-spanning production of this scale. It just doesn't work that way. Big studios like Ubisoft keep their costs down by relying on in-house staff, marketing, QA, even musicians are all employed directly, which can blur the line as to who's considered core to development. So when industry veterans highlight Clair Obscur's achievement, they're talking about the dev team specifically. Jeff Keighley opened Summer Game Fest by calling it a monumental achievement made by a team of under 30 developers. And Hideo Kojima quipped, "They only have like 33 team members and a dog. That's my ideal when I create something with a team." Their praise is well earned, as Kojima had 80 to 120 devs on Death Stranding over 3 years, and Remedy used hundreds on Alan Wake 2.
That's right.
But for those outside the industry, it can be a little misleading, and so the lean and keen development team deserves acclaim, and yet the full headcount was closer to 333 once you include external partners. Outsourced teams handled score performance, voice work, marketing, casting, mocap, porting, localization, testing, and more. And the credits list partners into the hundreds, such as a team of Korean animators. In fact, Broach actually recruited Korean animator Kim Seung-yeon from YouTube, having struggled to find anybody in France willing or even able to achieve the type of battle animations he envisioned for the game. And with him, he bought Sylvan Kim, whose showreel now includes an animation we're all pretty familiar with. And then on top of this, of course, was the Polish QA team, Qblock. Overseas or not, arguing whether or not these guys are core is a matter of semantics. They're animating main combat segments, technically they are. The Sandful playing with the number 33 for marketing purposes is a bit of fun. Keighley stating that the game was made by under 30 developers, well, that's just wrong. Of course, titans like COD and GTA rely on armies of production partners that number into the thousands, so that number of roughly 333 is nothing to scoff at either. But that said, as a full team size, it's a long way from being unheard of. What is almost unheard of, however, is just 33 developers creating a multi-platform epic that feels every bit as ambitious and polished and emotionally resonant as the biggest blockbusters in the industry. And what, frankly, is unheard of is 3 complete amateurs with no prior experience in game development creating something so beautiful and profound that it captured the attention of millions of players and earned the respect of nearly every serious game maker in the business, and critics too. Penguin Zero uploaded a video titled "Does This Actually Deserve All the Hype?" and without even naming the game or even saying it was a game at all, everybody already knew what he was talking about. And what did he say?
It blew all of my expectations out of the water. This game deserves all of the hype and all of the success that it's receiving and more.
For all the praise though, I think it is summed up best by Sven Vink, the founder of Larian Studios, when he stood on stage after Baldur's Gate 3 swept up half a dozen awards, including Game of the Year, and boldly predicted that Sandfall would be the next to take home the trophies, without even needing to say the name of the studio or the game.
Studio made their game because they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play themselves. The people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design. They didn't treat their developers like numbers on a spreadsheet. They didn't treat their players as users to exploit. And they didn't make decisions they knew were short-sighted in function of a bonus or politics. They knew that if you put the game and the team first, the revenue will follow.
And that, in the end, is what makes Expedition 33 so exciting. Not just that it is quite literally a thrill to play, but the publisher Kepler and developer Sandfall took a chance and made something for the right reasons from a gaming perspective, and using a gaming engine that's only in recent years really made it possible for small teams to deliver big results. And precisely as Sven Vink predicted, the money has followed, which frankly is all the investors need to know, and its unmissable exposure as a success story could well spell a new decade of reasonably priced, creatively brilliant games. Now, time will tell, and if you'd like to hear me talk about it, then please do subscribe, and either way, I'd be so grateful for a like. It honestly does help me so much. As always, thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourself, and hopefully see you next time.